Police officers, accompanied by search dogs, scoured a vast city landfill in hopes of finding any clue that could definitively confirm the grim fate of a pregnant woman. This landfill stretched over a huge area filled with more than 4,000 tons of solid waste. From the very start, their mission felt like searching for the proverbial needle in a haystack. Indeed, it seemed nearly impossible to find something as small as a scrap of clothing, let alone the remains of a missing woman. Nevertheless, despite the daunting odds, the officers persisted, methodically combing through endless heaps of discarded trash. Day after day, their dogs sniffed out even the faintest hint of human remains. Weeks turned into months, and morale sometimes wavered under the oppressive heat and the sheer volume of waste. Then, after 2 full months, a breakthrough changed everything. One of the lead detectives spotted a discolored, tangled mass that appeared to be human hair. On closer inspection, they realized it was not just hair. It was part of a severely damaged human body. Thanks to a combination of dental analysis and other forensic methods, experts ultimately confirmed the worst. The remains belonged to pregnant Lorie Hacking. Imagine, if you will, the picture-perfect couple. 2 people deeply in love, united in marriage, and joyfully expecting their first child. Their life appears to be on the brink of a new and blissful chapter. Then, in the blink of an eye, that bright image is shattered, leaving only confusion and heartbreak. The enchanting wife abruptly vanishes. The devastated husband is left in a haze of despair. The police, despite their best efforts, cannot find any immediate explanation for what happened. This is where our story begins. The story of Mark and Lorie Hacking, 2 young, successful, and seemingly happy individuals whose life together was admired by everyone around them. Yet, one fateful July morning in 2004 would redefine everything. Lorie went out for a jog and never returned. Mark Hacking came into the world on April 24, 1976, in the city of Orem, Utah, in the United States. He was the 5th child in a devoted and deeply religious Mormon family headed by Doug and Janet Hacking. With 7 children in total, 4 sons and 3 daughters, the Hacking household was vibrant, active, and guided by the principles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This strong affiliation with the Mormon faith shaped every aspect of family life, from daily prayers and church attendance to communal gatherings where faith and family were at the center of every conversation. Doug Hacking, a respected pediatrician with a well-known medical practice, provided for his large family's every need, ensuring they enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle and a well-regarded social standing within their community. Growing up, Mark was easily recognizable by his bright red hair, smattering of freckles, and friendly, outgoing demeanor. Whether it was in church youth gatherings or casual neighborhood events, young Mark was at ease, striking up conversations, cracking jokes, and making people feel instantly at home around him. The Hacking children were all high achievers in their respective pursuits. Some excelled in academics, others in community service, so Mark constantly felt pressured to keep up with his siblings' accomplishments. Early on, he discovered that he could gain attention or avoid embarrassing situations by spinning small lies or exaggerations. These fibs started innocently enough, claiming he had scored higher on tests than he really had, or pretending he knew how to play a musical instrument better than he did. Over time, though, the tendency to fabricate stories became more entrenched, serving as a coping mechanism for Mark whenever he felt inadequate. When Mark turned 19, he followed the traditional path set out for many young men in the Mormon Church by embarking on a missionary journey. Initially, all seemed promising. His outgoing personality helped him connect with new communities, and he found success in drawing people to the faith. Fellow missionaries spoke of his easy rapport with strangers and his knack for storytelling, which, despite often being more embellished than strictly factual, proved compelling. Yet the bright veneer eventually cracked. After sunset, Mark would occasionally break mission rules by socializing, attending parties, and engaging in activities the church frowned upon. Word of these breaches in conduct soon reached his superiors. To shield both Mark and the family from public scandal, the church sent him home prematurely. Upon his return, Mark resorted to more deceit, insisting it was all a misunderstanding rather than a failing on his part. In stark contrast to the turmoil swirling around Mark's life, Lorie Suarez's background seemed simpler and more grounded. She was born on December 31st, 1976 in California, in a significant event that would change her trajectory forever. 4-month-old Lorie and her older brother Paul were adopted by Thelma and Harold Suarez. Lorie's childhood was marked by both challenges and warmth. In 1987, after Thelma and Harold divorced, Lorie moved to Utah with her mother, while Paul remained in California with their father. This separation made her mother-daughter bond grow even stronger, and throughout her teenage years, Lorie would lean on Thelma for both emotional and practical support. Lorie thrived socially at Orem High School, where her earnestness, kindness, and sincerity drew people toward her almost effortlessly. Classmates spoke of how she radiated positivity, whether through her warm smile or her willingness to stand up for others who felt left out. Elected class representative multiple times, Lorie also found passion in sports, particularly baseball, where she dedicated countless hours honing her skills. Yet, life was far from lavish for the Suarez family. Lorie had to balance her schoolwork, her extracurricular interests, and a part-time job at a local car wash to help her mother make ends meet. Even so, Lorie never lost sight of her dream: to one day marry a boy from her church community, build a loving and stable home, and become a devoted mother to the children she hoped to have. Mark and Lorie first crossed paths in high school. Despite being in different grades, they moved in overlapping circles within the Mormon youth community, attending the same dances, weekend outings, and religious study sessions. The spark that flared between them was immediate. People who knew them at the time recall how Mark could make Lorie laugh like no one else, his humor and quick wit captivating her from the start. Their courtship was a whirlwind of shared faith, mutual friends, and bonding over hopes for the future. By 1999, 22-year-old Lorie and 21-year-old Mark decided to tie the knot, a development that seemed to delight everyone around them. Their families offered enthusiastic blessings. Well-wishers from church praised their devotion to each other, and for a while, it appeared the Hackings were set to thrive both personally and professionally. Their marriage became something of a model union within their religious community. Mark was frequently observed showering Lorie with small tokens of affection: flowers, heartfelt notes, or simple acts of kindness. Their joint commitment to their faith led them to teach Sunday school together, where they guided younger members in learning church doctrine. Mark, quick to offer help when parishioners or friends needed a hand, gained a reputation for generosity and service. Lorie, meanwhile, completed her studies and landed a job as an assistant at bank. She was diligent and conscientious, applying herself fully to make a stable income for the household. According to Mark, he too was devoting himself to self-improvement, claiming to be enrolled at the university, chasing academic distinction that would elevate their combined future prospects. But this vision of marital and professional harmony existed only on the surface. In a secret that Mark guarded as closely as any he had told before, he had actually dropped out of college back in 2002. Rather than confronting Lorie or admitting the truth, he concocted an elaborate charade. Each morning, he would gather his textbooks and leave their home as though heading to campus, sometimes even discussing fictitious classes or imagined professors at the end of the day. Once Lorie herself departed for her job at bank, Mark would quietly slip back home, spending the day doing whatever he pleased, reading, playing games, or simply biding his time, before emerging in the late afternoon to return from his alleged lectures. This persistent masquerade spoke to a deeper dysfunction in Mark's psyche, one that grew from a need to be admired, to measure up to perceived expectations. Meanwhile, Lorie remained entirely in the dark about his deception, trusting that her husband's words aligned with reality. She continued to labor at her job, saving money for the future they believed was just around the corner. The start of a new life with a baby on the way, a possible move for Mark's postgraduate opportunities, and the promise of an ever closer bond nurtured by their shared faith. All day long, Mark would hole up in the apartment to play video games, immersing himself in fictional worlds while keeping up the charade that he was engaged in serious academic work. Whenever Lorie came home in the evening, he would dramatically complain about the many hours he had supposedly spent wrestling with difficult coursework and demanding professors. To underscore his claims, he would sometimes lock himself in a small side room under the pretense of writing papers or completing online exams. This performance further convinced Lorie and any friends who came by that Mark was genuinely investing his days in rigorous study, forging a path toward graduation. Sometimes, as part of his ruse, Mark went so far as to arrange rendezvous with Lorie on the university campus. On these occasions, they might meet at the student center or pass each other in a corridor as though Mark was on his way to a lecture. He would even point out certain buildings or classroom locations to make everything seem even more believable. This clever choreography gave Lorie no reason to doubt him. She had always supported Mark's aspiration for higher education, and she took pride in believing that her husband was on track for a meaningful career. When the time finally came for Mark to graduate from the university, an event that Lorie had been joyfully anticipating, he came up with yet another deception. He feigned an illness on the day of the graduation ceremony. He claimed a sudden high fever or a bout of food poisoning prevented him from attending the official walk across the stage. Lorie, truly concerned for his health, wholeheartedly believed him. She, along with other family members, decided to host a small celebration later on, hoping to honor his accomplishment once he felt better. To keep up appearances, Mark posed for photos in a rented cap and gown, using a photo editing application to insert the image of a diploma in his hand. He even managed to produce pictures that vaguely resembled the backdrop of a real graduation event. Delighted and utterly convinced by these photos, Lorie and the family cheered him on without suspecting a thing. Before long, Mark's claims escalated once more. He began describing supposed trips to various states around the country for interviews at medical universities, each with its own renowned program. The flights and lodging expenses, however, were largely funded by Lorie, who spent the bulk of her own salary to underwrite his so-called future. She believed deeply in her husband's ambitions, seeing in him the potential to become a doctor who would follow in his father's footsteps as a respected medical professional. Mark's father, after all, was a pediatrician of high repute, and the family name carried a certain status. Lorie's trust in Mark was so absolute that she never considered investigating these trips or asking to see any tangible acceptance letters. In 2004, Mark announced the biggest news yet. He had been accepted to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill School of Medicine, specializing in oncology. He claimed to have received glowing references for his commitment and academic achievements. The news spread rapidly among friends and relatives, generating a flurry of congratulations and excitement. Both Mark and Lorie spoke eagerly of their imminent cross-country move. They told people they wanted to settle down in North Carolina, where Mark would, in theory, deepen his medical knowledge and begin the next stage of his career. Determined to stand by her husband's side, Lorie quit her steady job, an act that demonstrated her full faith in him and her willingness to make sacrifices to see him succeed. By July of that year, the couple hosted a heartfelt farewell party. Family members, church friends, and co-workers gathered to celebrate the bright future that seemed to lie ahead. Adding to the joyful atmosphere was the fact that Lorie was pregnant, a development that made the upcoming move feel like a leap into a wonderful new chapter of their lives. Everyone who attended raised toasts to Mark's perseverance and Lorie's unwavering support, remarking on how blessed they appeared, both personally and professionally. Yet, beneath this facade of happiness, an unsettling incident unfolded only a few days before they were supposed to leave. On July 16th, while at work, Lorie received a mysterious phone call that left her visibly distressed. According to a few co-workers who saw her reaction, she looked pale and anxious when she hung up. Without offering any explanation, she hurried home, leaving those around her puzzled. She would not speak about what had upset her so deeply, and by the next day, she seemed determined to continue with the move as planned. At the farewell party held on July 18th, Mark and Lorie again put on a united front. They smiled, posed for pictures, and thanked guests for their well wishes. No one at the gathering even hinted at suspecting that a terrible secret might lie behind all their positivity. On the morning of July 19th, 2004, 27-year-old Lorie adhered to her usual routine. She enjoyed jogging in the Memory Grove area, often choosing the wooded trails for a more leisurely run. She had planned to head straight to her workplace afterward. The night before, she and Mark agreed that he would drive her to her office by 7 a.m., ensuring she arrived on time. However, when Mark woke up that morning, he realized that Lorie was nowhere in the apartment. The bed was empty. Her usual belongings were not scattered around as they might be after a nighttime routine, and he simply assumed she was still out jogging. Feeling tired, he went back to sleep, only fully waking again at around 8. When Lorie still had not returned by that time, Mark looked out the window and noticed her car was also gone. In his mind, the simplest explanation was that she had decided not to wake him, choosing instead to drive herself to work. Yet by 10:11 a.m., a creeping worry led him to call the police. During that call, Mark stated that Lorie had gone for her morning run but never came home, emphasizing how uncharacteristic it was for her to deviate from her schedule or fail to check in. Soon after, he discovered that Lorie's work uniform, carefully laid out the night before, remained untouched at home. This alarmed him enough to file a missing persons report at 10:30 a.m., officially telling law enforcement that something was seriously amiss. Police officers responded quickly, searching the area near Memory Grove Park. They discovered Lorie's car parked near the entrance, yet there was no sign of any struggle or disarray inside the vehicle. It looked as though she had simply pulled in, locked up, and vanished into thin air. Mark, deeply distressed, contacted Lorie's family and her co-workers to find out if anyone had heard from her. The unanimous response was that Lorie was responsible, punctual, and not at all prone to impulsive or unexplained absences. In light of her pregnancy and her ordinarily reliable nature, alarm bells rang for everyone involved. Mark, along with friends and members of their church community, organized a search of the trails within Memory Grove Park, combing through wooded paths, undergrowth, and adjacent areas. But there was no sign whatsoever of Lorie, prompting more intense efforts by local authorities. Almost immediately, detectives noticed discrepancies and peculiar circumstances that cast a shadow of doubt over the case. For instance, Lorie's personal belongings, which included her purse with important documents, her wedding ring, and various key cards, had all been left behind at the couple's house. Investigators wondered why she would head out for a morning run without taking items she might normally keep close by, especially her wedding ring and her car-related keys. Further fueling their suspicions was the discovery of a brand new mattress in the bedroom, still with some of its packaging. Mark explained that he had thrown out their old mattress only a few days prior, allegedly because Lorie had heavily stained it with blood during her menstruation. He claimed the stain was so severe that it was unsalvageable. When investigators pressed for details, asking where they had slept in the interim days before he bought a replacement, Mark mentioned that they had simply slept on the bare box spring frame, lacking an actual mattress to lie on. Another item that caught the detective's eye was a hunting knife found on the nightstand next to the bed. The blade contained blood traces, and when questioned, Mark insisted that he had used it the previous day for some mundane activity, perhaps cutting some food, leaving the residue behind. Yet the timing seemed remarkably suspect. Even more troubling was the discovery that Mark had purchased the new mattress that very morning, July 19th, at precisely 10:23 a.m., a mere 12 minutes after he first reported Lorie missing. Police found the receipt inside his car, making it clear that he had been out shopping for a mattress almost immediately after claiming to be in a panic over Lorie's disappearance. This series of odd coincidences formed the basis for the investigators' suspicions. Additionally, they noted the position of the driver's seat in Lorie's vehicle. It was pushed far back from the steering wheel, suggesting that someone significantly taller than Lorie had been sitting there. Given that Lorie stood at about 5'3" and typically drove with the seat much closer to the pedals, the seat's position raised the question of who had last driven the car and why. All these strange details piled up, painting a bewildering picture. A wife who vanished without any of her usual belongings or personal effects, a freshly purchased mattress arriving almost in tandem with her husband's first frantic call to the police, a suspiciously placed hunting knife with traces of blood, and a driver's seat pushed far back in the missing woman's car. Neighbors, friends, and local news outlets began buzzing with speculation, while the police launched a more comprehensive inquiry. Were Mark's explanations plausible, or did they serve as a carefully orchestrated cover for something far more sinister? And how did this tie in with the suspicious phone call Lorie had received just days earlier? At that point, no one knew if Lorie's disappearance was voluntary or if she had fallen victim to foul play. Nonetheless, investigators quickly realized the importance of scrutinizing Mark's timeline of events and verifying every detail he provided. The detectives, determined to uncover every possible clue in Lorie Hacking's disappearance, diligently examined every corner of the couple's home for evidence. In the course of their search, they made a startling discovery among Lorie's personal notes. A letter addressed to Mark, in which Lorie stated she would divorce him if he did not change his ways. This written message was as clear as it was devastating. It revealed that Lorie, who had always been known as caring and responsible, was reaching the end of her patience. Given the letter's ominous tone and the fact that Lorie had vanished under such suspicious circumstances, the investigative team's suspicions immediately narrowed to Mark Hacking. They needed to determine if he had played a direct role in Lorie's disappearance, or if there was some other explanation for why she had suddenly dropped out of sight. The more they dug, however, the more incriminating information piled up against Mark. Police soon discovered that he had been living a life of relentless deceit. In stark contrast to the impression he had given his wife, family, and friends, Mark was not a rising medical student who had gained admission to a prestigious program in North Carolina. In fact, he had never even completed his undergraduate degree, having dropped out of college almost 2 years prior. Yet, day in and day out, he masked this reality with elaborate stories, meticulous lies, and outright forgeries. The most significant and grandiose of Mark's fabrications came to a head in mid-2004, when he proclaimed he had been accepted to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill School of Medicine, focusing on oncology. This new claim took the family by storm, prompting celebrations and well-wishes from all corners. Even more consequential was Lorie's decision to quit her job, effectively sacrificing her stable income so they could make the move to North Carolina. A farewell party was held in July where guests brought gifts, toasted to the couple's supposed bright future, and showered the expectant parents. Lorie was 5 weeks pregnant, with love and support. Everyone in attendance believed their story wholeheartedly, seeing them as a dedicated young couple stepping confidently toward a shared dream. But a moment arrived that would irrevocably change everything. On July 16th, just days before the planned move, Lorie made a phone call to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill to inquire about financial aid options and specific program details on behalf of Mark. During that conversation, she learned a harrowing truth. The school had no record of Mark Hacking, and there was no indication he had ever been admitted or even applied. Initially stunned, Lorie sought further confirmation, hoping it might be an error or misunderstanding. She tried to cross-check facts, but each piece of evidence drove home the same conclusion. Her husband had fabricated yet another chapter in his elaborate web of lies. Realizing the enormity of Mark's deception, Lorie felt betrayed and shattered. She had given up her job and was pregnant, believing wholeheartedly in the future Mark had painted for them. Overwhelmed by anger, sorrow, and disbelief, she wrote him a letter on July 18, clearly stating that she could no longer go on living in a relationship based on deceit. In that letter, she laid out an ultimatum, telling him she was prepared to leave him if he could not change. Despite her fierce love for him, Lorie was not willing to resign herself to a life built on a lie, particularly not with a baby on the way. Feeling desperate and needing to confide in someone, Lorie shared her predicament with her closest friend, but refrained from revealing everything to the rest of her social circle. As a result, most people, including family and mutual acquaintances, believed they were still the perfect couple. The contrast between the outward appearance of harmony and the private turmoil growing behind closed doors could not have been sharper. Witnesses reported hearing an argument in the Hacking household late in the evening on July 18, a heated exchange that suggested Lorie had finally called Mark to account for his many lies. This tension set the stage for the events of July 19, when Lorie suddenly and ominously disappeared without a trace. By now, the detectives had acquired powerful indications that Mark was the main suspect. The letter threatening divorce gave Lorie a clear motive for confronting him, and Mark, who had built his self-image around misleading everyone, now had a dire reason to take drastic action. The investigation took on a darker cast when forensics confirmed that bloodstains on a hunting knife found in the couple's bedroom indeed belonged to Lorie. Further examination uncovered more blood residue in the interior of Mark's car and in a nearby dumpster. The police also discovered a blood-soaked mattress that had been sliced apart, but despite these striking signs of violence, they initially lacked the ultimate proof of a homicide: Lorie's body. In the days following Lorie's disappearance, Mark's behavior grew increasingly erratic. On July 24th, authorities found him naked in a motel room, wearing only slippers and appearing to be in a state of deep mental distress. After evaluating him, professionals concluded that Mark might be feigning mental illness to evade responsibility. Sensing that he was rapidly losing control of the narrative he had so carefully spun, Mark allowed 2 of his brothers to visit him in the psychiatric facility. Perhaps feeling cornered or grappling with guilt, he finally broke down and disclosed a nightmarish confession. He admitted his years of duplicity, how he had lied about being in college, lied about attending medical school interviews, and how, on the night of July 19th, he had shot Lorie in the bedroom while she slept. She had been 5 weeks pregnant. Mark claimed that he believed this to be the only way to stop Lorie from exposing his deceptions, which had escalated beyond his ability to contain them. In a chilling step-by-step account, Mark revealed that he had disposed of Lorie's body and the blood-stained knife-cut section of the mattress in different dumpsters. Early in the morning, he had driven Lorie's car to a nearby park to stage the illusion that she had gone out for a run and never returned. Then, he placed a phone call to the police, feigning panic and concern to solidify his story. Mark's brothers, horrified by his confession, immediately passed the information on to the authorities. Armed with Mark's own words, investigators finally had what they needed to place him under arrest on August 2, 2004, charging him with suspicion of murder. Yet the detectives still faced one massive challenge. They did not have Lorie's body. The entire case's resolution depended on recovering it to provide tangible proof of Mark's guilt and to give Lorie's family a measure of closure. Spurred on by Mark's admission that he had used dumpsters, law enforcement teams sifted through vast amounts of refuse in landfills and collection sites, determined to locate any identifiable remains or possessions linked to Lorie. The community, horrified by the possibility that this vibrant young woman had met such a grim fate, watched in anguish as search crews worked day and night to uncover the truth of what really happened to Lorie Hacking. Police officers armed with search dogs descended on the sprawling city landfill, determined to find any trace that might finally confirm the grim fate of Lorie Hacking. This landfill, covering a massive area with more than 4,000 tons of solid waste, was the designated drop-off point for refuse from the very dumpsters Mark Hacking had used to dispose of incriminating evidence. From the outset, the undertaking resembled an attempt to locate the proverbial needle in a haystack. A mountain of garbage towered around them, battered by the elements and compactor machines. Indeed, it seemed all but impossible to recover anything as small as a shred of clothing, let alone a missing woman's remains. Yet, despite the daunting odds, officers persisted, methodically scouring through countless piles of discarded debris. Day after day, their dogs sniffed for even the faintest hint of human remains. Weeks stretched into months, and morale sometimes flagged under the oppressive heat and the sheer volume of waste. Then, on October 1st, 2004, fully 2 months after Mark's startling confession, a breakthrough occurred that would change the direction of the investigation forever. One of the lead detectives noticed a discolored, matted clump of what appeared to be human hair. On closer inspection, they realized it was more than just hair. It was part of a severely damaged human body. Although the remains were in such poor condition that identifying distinct features or determining a cause of death immediately was out of the question, forensic experts quickly took possession of the fragments for thorough testing. Through a combination of dental analysis and other forensic methods, the examiners ultimately confirmed the worst. The remains belonged to Lorie Hacking. The news shocked the entire community and made official what many had already feared: that Lorie's disappearance was no innocent accident or random tragedy, but a deliberate crime. While the body's condition rendered it impossible for the coroners to specify an exact cause of death, the fact that Lorie's body had been dumped in a landfill and left to decay in anonymity bore out the investigators' initial suspicions. Mark Hacking, driven by his desire to maintain the elaborate fiction of his life, had indeed murdered his pregnant wife, then callously disposed of her remains. In the eyes of the police, this discovery was the final piece of evidence that solidified Mark's guilt. He had already confessed, yet a bizarre new twist emerged. The suspect abruptly refused to enter a guilty plea. Perhaps facing the looming specter of life behind bars led him to gamble on a more advantageous legal strategy, or perhaps he still clung to some last-ditch hope of escaping the full weight of the law. Whatever his thinking, it ran counter to everything Lorie's grieving family wanted. They pleaded with Mark, urging him to plead guilty and spare everyone a protracted, agonizing trial that would dredge up painful details. Eventually, Mark relented. He struck a plea deal with the prosecution, a decision that carried significant consequences for how this tragic case would be resolved. On April 15, 2005, Mark Hacking, by then notorious for both his lies and the cruelty of the crime, stood before a judge and pleaded guilty to the charge of murdering Lorie and concealing her body. In accordance with Utah state law at the time, he received a sentence of life in prison with the possibility of parole. Initially, that possibility could come after a minimum of just 6 years, a detail that horrified many people who followed the case. The idea that anyone who killed his pregnant wife could be eligible for parole after just 6 years seems shockingly condescending. Yet it was the maximum penalty allowable by the statute as it existed. Recognizing the brutality and gravity of the offense, however, the Utah Parole Board soon clarified that Mark would likely spend at least 3 decades behind bars. Under their guidelines, the earliest year Mark could even submit a parole application would be 2035, meaning he would remain incarcerated well into middle age.